Okay.
There we are, Dr. Fuller.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm actually doing really well.
You're looking good.
I got my Horus Group shirt on, man. Look at that.
And a darn fine shirt it is.
I'm riding the brand over here like Yellowstone.
Nobody appreciates it more than I do.
Well, thank you for all you do for our community and have done for our nation. And I don't mean it tritely like this. Oh, thank you for your service. Easy, pal. But for those that have walked the walk, man, from one to another, appreciate everything you do and have done, man.
And I, you, Rich. It's high praise coming from a man of your stature, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, my honor. Just to know you. Will Parker is on coin number 800. Tony out there in Fast Group is on. He is watching us from the YouTubes. We got 5 folks on so far. Just a quick word of caution to today's show. We're having some internet connectivity issues, and if we have to fight through them, we're just going to fight through them, guys, because I think this content and the discussion we're going to have today is going to be great. Most of the folks that are going to watch this or listen to it in the podcast to come have probably been concealed carrying for a long time. Some of this stuff may be old news to you. Some of it may be new, but if you've got a friend or a relative that's new to concealed carrying a firearm, this might be the show to share with them. What do you think, Dr. Fuller?
I think it's a great place to jump in. It really is. I believe we're going to hit on some of the foundational aspects of the American Warrior Society, what it's about and its approach to things in general. I think this is a very good place to start.
Yeah, and the genesis of this is an article I wrote probably 8 years ago, man. And I wrote it in response to a lot of really screwy advice out there on YouTube. I mean, I just watched some of these and like, okay, that's a good point. And then the next 3 points would be just like, this is garbage. This is garbage information. So a lot of this advice is going to be hard won. So please, before we go any further, thank you to the 8 folks watching us live. Like, comment, hit the share button and all that other stuff before we get going too much further. And I would be remiss, Dr. Fuller, if I didn't mention your award-winning book, No Safe Alternatives, Improving How We Teach Cops to Kill. It won the BIBA award. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It did. 2023 best law enforcement book or law enforcement training book. I say that with a certain degree of pride. My wife still makes me take the trash out, though. We'll keep pushing it.
The first one is a really good text on how do we improve and give you some training methodologies and so forth. However, this one is kind of a tiptoe through the mind of Dr. Fuller and his 20-year odyssey inside the FBI. It is called Painting Over Rust. Huge fan of this. Outstanding book. And there are more books to come, folks. When Dr. Fuller was writing this and we were discussing it, I said, are you going to talk about Afghanistan? Are you going to talk about your time in Gitmo interrogating folks? He said, I think we're going to do separate books with that. So what was your thought on that, Dr.
Fuller? Sloth. If you get right down to it, I didn't want to write a 700-page opus, magnum opus. And honestly, I didn't think I could give appropriate attention to all the disparate topics if I tried to jam Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay, for example, into the book you just showed. They are mentioned in there, certainly, but there's significant emotional events for me. There's significant historical events, and I think it's important to add these first-hand tidbits to the historical record. I certainly don't want to portray myself as being, a capital C contributor to the historical epic that is the United States, but I think it is important that those of us who were there at the time write things down so that future generations can perhaps learn and not make some of the mistakes we made, do a better job next time around.
Yeah. And I kind of feel the same way about my book. I often joke around, it's going to raise testosterone, all that kind of stuff. But in all seriousness, very similar thought process. I mean, the Gulf War now that you and I were involved in, Gulf War I, 1990, 1991, it's fading into memory. I mean, hell, the distance between that and us now is what Korea was to us then, which is just mind-blowing, right?
That's true. It's true. Our kids are going to grow up and have, in your case, have grown up. I have one that's grown up. The Gulf War is a historical event to them.
Yeah, and a lot. So Company H, a sideshow to the big show by Private Samuel Watkins. I've mentioned it many times on the show. By far and away, one of my favorite books. It kind of hits different trajectories for me. It's for one, it's Civil War, and which I'm very interested in. It's a memoir, which I'm very interested in. It's incredibly well written. But I wanted to write something akin to that. And it was, when he wrote it, it was just a series of little vignettes that was put inside I think the Cumberland Gazette or whatever it was, this new local newspaper, and somebody asked him to compile it into a book. So it was never meant to be a book, but it became one. And the same thing for, I write in here about nightclub culture in the 90s when I worked at strip clubs and stuff like that, and working in a prison and, being a cop. So there's lots of different aspects of my life. I didn't just have one path. There was a lot of different ins and outs of stuff that I did there.
Well, and I think that has historical value beyond just the entertainment value of that book. And it's a very entertaining book. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. But beyond that, it has historical value. 100 years from now, people will want to read about these things. There will be people doing academic research. I have no doubt that some of them will quote your book and will cite your book. Because it does add depth to the cold historical facts. Somebody can tell you, look, the Gulf War started this day and it's ended that day. This was how many American casualties, this is how many Iraqi casualties, so many miles, how many gallons, how many MREs, whatever. But it's a different animal to say, hey, look, I didn't like the flies and they were driving me nuts. They drove us all nuts, let's be honest. So I went out and I found a water cistern and I cut a hole in it and I made a door and that's where I live.
Yep. That was home for months.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that you just don't get in a dry historical text. That sort of first person on the ground, gritty perspective that you bring to the historical record. And I think that's critical.
Well, thank you, sir. It's the same for years. What does a brick agent do day in and day out? What's it like sitting in a cubicle working a stack of cases that nobody else wanted to take on? Thank you to the 14 folks watching us live, man. You can check out tcfuller.com. It's probably the easiest way to get your books, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to find it and find me.
We got Alan Kelly is on, PJ Tahoe, and speaking of FBI agents, Johnny Kelly is on from Kentucky. John Shriver is on. Yukon, Oklahoma is coin number 1919. If you want to find out if becoming a coin member of our Self-Preservation Society is the right decision for you, AmericanWarriorSociety.com. Take a 14-day free test drive. Will Parker says, every book these two gentlemen have written are excellent. Thank you, sir. Will Rhodes is on from Missouri. Alan Kelly says, I agree with you, Will. They both excellent books. Bruce is on. Thank you to the 12 folks. And we're going to jump into the show without any further ado. 10 CCW tips to win the fight with a handgun. And I think this is one of those things that has missed the context of why the hell are you carrying a gun in the first place?
Indeed. And let's, for those who don't know, what does CCW stand for, Rich?
Concealed carry weapon, I would imagine.
it's one of those terms that we all hear. We all know what it means, but do we?
Yeah, do we?
It's always important, I think, to make sure that we're all speaking the same language.
Yeah.
We understand the definition of our terms.
So a little background. Here's just a few of the concealed carry licenses I have had throughout my time. There's a picture of young, fresh-faced Rich Brown there. I think I looked at it. I was the 2,500 something concealed carry permit in the state of Tennessee back in 1990. I applied in 1995. I was granted it in 1996. It took almost a year back then to get this damn thing. It was the first one I ever got when I first got out of the Marine Corps. And back then you can see Colt 1991 A1, and you had to have the serial number. It was attached to the gun. You couldn't get caught carrying anything but that one gun. You see various other ones I've had throughout my time that were valid only with a military ID because I technically was a Tennessee state resident. As I moved around the country as a Marine, I never gave up my Tennessee state residency, so I would have to get these little wonky concealed carry cards everywhere. But now here's my most current one. It is a lifetime concealed carry card.
From the state?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, as you can see on that thing there, if you can see it, I'll blow it up. Lifetime.
Good on you.
Yeah, and now some people, Dr. Fuller, will say, I don't need that crap. The Constitution is my concealed carry permit. What do you say to that, Dr. Fuller?
I say philosophically I'm in agreement with you, but that is not likely to save you from the depredations of prosecutor on a rampage. So, do what you can afford, right? If that's what you think, you're willing to, if that's the hill you want to die on, you go right ahead. And I think we're going to address the legal issues later in the show, are we not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So a little background. I guess my point is I've been carried concealed prior to that as a Marine, right? Overseas, just the job that I had at the time required that I wear civilian attire, carry concealed. So I was learning on the fly in like 1992 when I first started carrying concealed. I went to high risk personnel protection course at Quantico, came back from that and started carrying concealed with my job. Of course, I didn't have a license for it. The Marine Corps was my license, I guess. And then when I got out, I quickly got a license. So my point of saying that is I've been carrying a concealed firearm for 32 years. How about you, Dr. Fuller?
Well, legally,
Yeah,
because
right. Yeah.
there was a time in college when I may have fractured some laws. I got my first concealed carry permit while I was at the officer's basic course at Fort Benning, Georgia. And that would have been in 1990. 90? Yeah, I got it before the Gulf War. So anywhere I was stationed in the States, I would get a concealed carry permit. So I had that one, and then right away I deployed to Europe. I was over there for 3 years, so didn't have a concealed carry because that just no such thing. And then when I got back, I went to school in Fort Lee, Virginia, got a permit there as soon as I got on the ground. I was fortunate. Both of those states were pretty painless. The processes were pretty painless. I mean, Virginia made me go to a one-day class. There's guys out there with 6-inch barrel revolvers trying to draw those from a concealed, Uncle Mike's holster rig. I mean, it was horrid. Then when I was down at Fort Bragg, I got one there. That was easy because, there's Fort Bragg, right? So and Lejeune. So they had a ton of ways to get permits there. So that was pretty simple. And then I went back overseas. Actually, before I got to Bragg, went back overseas, no permit for concealed carry. Then I got back, had a Bragg, and then I got in the bureau and didn't need. And I was in Vermont, which at the time was the only constitutional carry state.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a permit there, but I always made sure when I transferred in the bureau, I went to New York. I tried to get a concealed carry permit there, but wasn't there long enough to go through that freaking nightmare. When I moved to North Carolina, I got a civilian concealed carry permit, despite the fact that I was carrying as an FBI special agent. And then when I moved to South Carolina, I did the same thing. And then in retirement, I have HR 218 covering me. So as long as I shoot a qual every year and the qualifying agency signs the documents, I have national concealed carry permit. I still get a South Carolina permit. And we can talk about that when we get into things.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a long-winded way of saying it. My first permit was in 1991 or 90.
Well, I say this because the advice we're going to give you is hard-won advice. Concealed carry is new to a lot of people. A lot of people don't realize it's the permitting process has been around forever. Of course, the Second Amendment's been around since 1781. I don't know.
Ratified in 81, 83, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So a long time. But
before you and I.
Right, but the ubiquitousness of concealed carry is relatively a recent phenomenon within the last generation or two.
Well, like I said, when I first got to Vermont in, what year was that, 1998, it was the only constitutional carry state in the country. It was the only one that didn't issue a permit. And it blew my mind because I'd, of course, grown up in California. So when I got to a state where not only did they not have a permit process, but they just didn't, the cops up there just assumed everybody was armed, and they would talk to people. They take their gun while they were talking to them and give it back to them and send them on their merry way. That just was mind-blowing to me. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
Oh, I can bet as a Californian. Speaking of, I was at the range, man. I got that LPVO, and I took it and spent, I don't know, probably 3 hours on the range Saturday running it in this little short barrel pistol.
Pretty gun. Very pretty gun.
Daddy's happy man. Well, anyway, there was one of the guys working the range there is a retired Riverside, California police officer. Great guy. And we hit it off real well. And he was telling me about another buddy of his who moved out here to Tennessee and lives in my county too. Former reconnaissance Marine and LA County Sheriff's deputy. So I need to hook up with him too. But I'm like, hey man, You Californians are welcome here, brother, but don't mess up my state. I'm a seventh
Leave your
generation.
politics at home.
I'm a seventh generation East Tennessean, brother. Don't come in here and stomp in our mud puddle. He's like, brother, I'm so happy to be in a free state. He was genuinely just a great guy.
They
Paris
do exist, but they're few and far between anymore.
Yeah, Paris is on. He says, hello, Rich and Dr. Fuller. Hello from Beaumont, Texas. Glad to have you. He has coin number 2051. Like and hit that share button, guys. So I wanted to just kind of throw that out there. This is hard-won advice, and hopefully you'll learn something or find something usable today, or maybe spark a little something here. So a word of caution, this is not an all-inclusive list. I'm sure we're going to leave out stuff. We're going to discuss things to help you better prepare to concealed carry a handgun to win a hypothetical gunfight, shooting, whatever. I think a lot of people get lost in the sauce as far as like, I carry a gun. Okay, brother, why are you carrying that thing? Well, because I'm carrying it. I see that. Why? Because you might be in a gunfight.
Yeah, I think your point early on there, Rich, if I may,
please.
is excellent. This whole list here is not supposed to be an inclusive four-corner document. Stay in here and you're fine.
Right.
It's supposed to trigger critical thought. And we talk about a lot on the show about the importance of engaging your mind. You need to take the information that you're getting, the training you're getting, and apply it to your own use case and your own situation. How does your situation in northern Wisconsin differ from Beaumont, Texas, from occupied Virginia, from the Philippines, right? So take this information and use it to inform your decisions.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Because I mean, the fact that handgun is not a perfect tool for this hypothetical gunfight you may or may not be in tomorrow. The ideal would probably be a rifle of some sort, or not be there to begin with. I mean,
a tank,
right? Abrams. Although, so I put this picture in there and I realized, wait a minute, that's my pistol. So I get it. It's still a pistol, but it's a rifle caliber handgun. How about that?
That'll work.
Training, Dr. Fuller.
Training. The essence of the American Warrior Show.
Yeah. So to me, this is number one. This is the foundational aspect of carrying a handgun to win the fight. And I think a lot of well-intentioned Americans out there think, well, I went through the 8-hour class. State of X says that I can carry a concealed handgun. I'm good to go. What do you think?
I think you're right. And I think it's just a bad idea. I remember a year or two ago when Mike got some significant pushback, Mike Seeklander, when he said that, you really should get training, because people thought he was saying that you couldn't exercise your Second Amendment rights without training. And that wasn't, of course, what he was saying. But it's critical. And I look at it like swim lessons, right? The government doesn't say you have to go learn how to swim. It's just a really good idea. It's just a really good idea. And far too many people, and you see them all the time in your classes. I see them all the time in my classes. I've seen them in Andrew Bronca's legal training classes. People show up, they've got a gun, they've got a holster, they've got a docker's belt that came with the pants that they bought. Mm-hmm. And, they bought the gun based on the information that the well-meaning fella at the gun store told them, or an article they read online. And they have zero training. And my point to them is, look, saying you're armed because you own a gun, but you haven't trained with it, is just like telling me that you're a concert pianist because you bought a piano.
Ooh, well said.
Right? I mean, okay, you bought an airplane, you know how to get it off the ground and get it on the ground. But can you dogfight?
Right.
No, you can't. And it blows my mind. And so I'm going to paint with a very broad brush here, and I think the other instructors, especially that are watching, will feel me on this. Men in America, we think that we need training in most stuff except for three things. Now, there are three areas where every man, I don't know why, but it just seems to be, we all think that we know how to drive cars fast, shoot guns well, and make sweet love to our lady, all without any education on the process. And I don't get that. You tell them, hey, look, we're going to teach you how to play badminton. Okay, great. I'll learn that. Hey, you're going to be on the football team. Great. We got to go to practice. Right? Here's a gun. I'm good. Wait, slow your roll down.
Right. Tony's got a funny comment. He says, hey, everyone could be a pilot once.
Fair point, right?
Fair point.
Walking away from that landing is the tough part.
Yeah. And Jeff says, there's enough training videos on YouTube. Ha ha ha. And that's, like I said, that's what kind of the stepping off point from this was. I'm like, I don't want to do it. I got better things to do with mine, but there's so much bad information or silly information on YouTube that I'm like, I got to push back against the ignorance out there and let me come up with a top 10. And then let's discuss it with people like Dr. Fuller and Mike Seekland. And I did this show probably 8 years ago, 8 years ago, when I first wrote it. But and you are going to be teaching a handgun gunfighting course in Montana, are you not?
I am. Will Parker, big friend of the show, AWS member. I think he's here this morning. Invited me to come out to his range and train. And, that was a very flattering invitation. It's not the kind of class I typically teach. But you know what? When Will Parker reaches out and says, come on out, who am I to say no to going to teach some fine folks in Montana, of all places? So,
I can't look that mustache in the face and tell it no.
Well, that's the other thing, right? He may not leave the house. That mustache might come out here to South Carolina and kick my ass. So, you got to be cognizant of these things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Johnny King says that Lumberton, North Carolina incident is a great example of having a gun and no idea how to effectively use it. You familiar with that incident?
I heard about it. Of course, Lumberton's just up the road from where I live. And honestly, if you're going to live in Lumberton, you probably ought to know how to use a gun, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I heard about something out there, but you don't want to be a loot drop, right? You don't want to be carrying the gun for the other guy.
And it's a terrible tragedy, man. I encourage people to watch that incident. Good Samaritan trying to stop a carjacking in progress, and he fires several rounds at the carjacker, and the carjacker ends up running him over and killing him. So again, and we've said this before many times on the show, when you're inside your vehicle, you're inside your primary weapon system, and I think that's a great example of the destructive power of a car relative to a 9mm round. Yeah, no, that's true. I remember giving a class in the Bureau about how to stop a car with a handgun. And, people are like, oh, is there a critical place? You shoot the distributor cap? What are you going to do? I'm like, no, you shoot the driver. Amen.
Because you're not going to stop a car with, I don't care if you have a Barrett 50 cal. You can shoot that thing. I've been in vehicles in Afghanistan that were hit by RPK rounds and AK rounds. I mean, shot to crap. All the windows shot out of them, tires blown. Car kept going.
Yeah. Now,
it may not go forever, but it's going to go. So, yeah, cars are no joke. They're not to be trifled with.
No, hell no. Let's see. So training, and what are we talking about when we're talking about training? We're talking about firearms training beyond just the basics of how to clean and disassemble your firearm. Okay. I'm talking about how to draw from concealment, closed front garment, open front garment, etc. Tactics. Do you need to be a tactical ninja, some JSOC operator? Hell no. But you do need to know some basic tactics like the difference between cover and concealment, how to move around corners, things like that. Very simple. Medical. Do you need to be a trauma surgeon? Hell no. But you might want to know how to put on a chest seal correctly, how to stop the bleeding, how to pack a wound. Edge weapons. If part of your weapon retention defense is to employ an edge weapons to cut someone off your firearm, then you probably need to know how to integrate that edge weapon. Anything else, Dr. Fuller, on the training piece?
Yeah, I think it absolutely has to be said. It needs to be quality training. It can't just be any old knucklehead. And you and I traded quite a bit of videos and reels back and forth, Rich, of just some of the silly crap that's out there. Do your due diligence, folks. Before you get training, make sure it's good training, that it's quality training. Do the Yelp reviews, ask around. Don't just go to some guy because he wears black gloves and he's in Detroit. That's not a wise idea.
Commander Brown, come on.
But make sure it's good quality training, and make sure it's pertinent training. Okay. I mean, I don't really foresee a situation where I need to take 500-yard headshots in my future. Now, I may want to take a sniper class for fun, but that's deeper into the pool than I want to start out. I want to start out being able to operate that firearm in those moments of gravest extreme. And also, folks, to the point you just made, Rich, remember, perfection is the enemy of good enough. All right. Your use case is doubtfully kicking doors in Fallujah anymore. Right? Yeah. It may have been, probably not today. And a lot of the tactics we use in the military, in combat in the military, frankly, would get you thrown in prison here in the United States.
100%.
They simply do not apply. So if you're going to learn to fight within the ROE that you have, right? Make sure it's pertinent and make sure it's good enough. Do you have to have a sub 1 second draw to first shot at 7 yards on a 8-inch circle? No. Is it nice? Is it something to chase around? Sure, of course it is. There's the 5x5x5 drill that's going around in a lot of the shooting communities right now. And I think it's a great drill. It's a lot of fun. You go out there, you put a playing card up at 5 yards and you shoot 5 rounds from the draw in 5 seconds or less and try to put them all on the card. I think that's a great drill. It addresses a lot of key areas. But the reality of needing to make a 5-shot, 5-second from the draw in a social interaction is less, I think, likely. Now, there's a lot of skills that you can train in that drill, but must you be able to draw in sub 1 second and start putting rounds on target? Debatable. Make sure that you have the gun. Make sure you know when to use the gun. Make sure you have the mindset to use the gun. The timing, work within the time constraints that you have.
No, well said, my friend. Let's see, I'm looking at some comments here. There's great comments coming in. One of the things that Derek has a great point here. It says the other problem is the ones who will take the training class, but they never practice what they learn. Wow.
Yeah, I have a kind of a bugaboo about the current firearms training paradigm that's prevalent in the United States, and I've talked about it in my books. We have the wandering minstrel, right? The traveling trainer. Mike Seeklander makes his living doing that, for example. You often assist him in that, where you come to town, you train for a day, 2 days, a week, and then you leave. And that's great for the people that are there and they get to do that seminar and they get to learn from the best. And that's awesome. And I highly recommend you do it. But to Derek's point, it's consistency that's going to get you where you really need to be. And, you look at strip malls in the United States and every one of them, it seems like, has a Taekwondo studio, has a martial arts studio. Any of us that train in any sort of martial art, it's not a once every 4 years when, Royce Gracie comes to town thing. And then you go back into your, garage and train in your garage. You go weekly. You go a couple times a week. You're in there all the time. You're rolling all the time. How often have you rolled just in the month of April?
Oh God, twice.
See my point? You're going consistently. When was the last time you trained with a national level trainer?
Firearms or grappling?
Firearms.
With Seeklander, I don't know, a couple months ago.
But you see my point? And you are Mike Seeklander's best friend in the world.
Yeah.
You have an access to him that no one else does.
Yep.
Get the consistent training. Get out there and practice. Derek makes a really good point. If you go and you train with Mike Seeklander, that's some of the best training you're ever going to get. Mm-hmm. But if you then go home, put your gun, wipe your gun with a nice soft cloth, put it in your gun safe and go on about your life, those skills will deteriorate and they won't myelinate. They won't get into your long-term use case. You won't be able to pull them out in that moment of need, which is really what you're training for.
Mm-hmm. I'm next week. I can't say who it is, but I'm going to been invited out to paying me to come out and evaluate their training. It's a law enforcement agency. It's a 2-day course that they're putting on. Like, hey, you can take the course or just audit the course. We'll pay you. Are we on target here? Are we off target? What we're doing? I'm like, yeah, sure. Happy to come out. But again, this is something that it needs to be part of your lifestyle. If you are going to strap on a gun as an armed American, I salute you. Welcome to the tribe and all that other happy stuff. But there's responsibility that comes with being part of this tribe. And one of the things I love what Johnny King says here is just training without context is a good springboard to land yourself in prison. Well said, my dear friend. And Tony reminds us that Mountain Man Medical, who's one of the sponsors of the American Warrior Show, has an excellent free training series available on their website, Mountain Man Medical. We have a co-branded trauma kit that we did with them. It's very reasonably priced, folks. It's got everything you need in it. Me and Mike, Justin Carroll, who's a paramedic, former MARSOC operator, OGA contractor, we kind of put this thing together as what we would want to have in our vehicle or on our kit. Please go to Mountain Man Medical. If you don't have one of these guys, you need to have one in the vehicle, probably one in your home. Just some really good high quality products over there.
And they're really good people too. As a quick anecdote, I reached out to them because I wanted to put one of their stop the bleed kits in every classroom in my kids' elementary school. And I had lined up the funding from the PTA. They were going to buy all the kits. Mountain Man Medical, we were going to buy in bulk, so they were really working with us on pricing. And they obviously had the follow-up training available online, as well as we were going to work something out perhaps where they come out and do some training for us. Everything was lined up. I hit the principal at the school, and he's like, no. And I asked, I said, why would you not want this? And this is sort of the mindset you've got to overcome. Well, the teachers are so stressed already. They have so many other things to do. I'm like, and we have first aid kits in the office. Like, okay, so the active shooter is between the classroom and the office. What good are those going to do? You know, the kid's bleeding out now. You're gonna, and there are kids in 7 classes. How many first aid kits you got?
And I guarantee you that first aid kit is like a boo-boo kit. It is not. It's not going to have Kerlix gauze in it. It's not going to have Israeli bandages. It's going to have chest seals. I'd be shocked if there's a chest seal on that thing.
I would too. And you know the deal. So there's 1. There's 2. How many people get shot in these things?
And I remind you, and this is something Brian McLaughlin from Mountain Man Medical, and I've had him on the show several times. Like, remember, for every casualty, you're probably going to plan on 2 chest seals, 1 for the entrance and 1 for the exit wound. So, 2 times,
right?
The average school shooting, 8, 9 children. I mean, that's quite a few chest seals. Which it's a number greater than 1, Dr. Fuller.
Absolutely, and we have teachers that die protecting these kids, right? They get between the shooter and the kids. So you can't tell me that the teachers aren't dedicated, that the teachers aren't in there, to keep those kids alive. Why wouldn't you give them the tools? It just blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. And he was like, no, we're not doing it. And so I went to the head of security for the whole district. And I was like, come on, let's do this. He's like, no, we just, and I got all kinds of bureaucratic runaround. And of course, my lawyer wife is involved. So we'll see how that goes.
What's his background, the head of security for the school?
He did something up in DC. I think he, was a DC patrol officer, I think. I can't swear to that. So, he's working within the perspective of his world.
And the only reason I asked Dr. Fuller is I had, when I was the Red Cross guy for the state of Tennessee and had to interact with a lot of these folks when we were doing this stuff, more often than not, about 50% of the time, they were a failed educator that they had put in that spot. Maybe they were too stressed out. And their job may have been on paper that they were the county school security officer, and they knew nothing about security if they were a failed teacher. They were stressed out, and they gave them the job of truancy. So that collateral duty became the most important thing because they could measure their effectiveness on the truancy. I mean, don't get me started, but it kind of bleeds over into what PJ is saying. He says, TC, the biggest issue I have with alert training, and of course, that's the school killer training. It's once every 5 years or so. Got to train those skills and those decision OODA loops all the time.
Yeah. And it's very frustrating, I think, for those of us from this part of the world, the community, to run into those attitudes. And it's absolutely critical to beat those walls down. It's just very, very tough. But it all starts with training yourself, right? To know what you're dealing with, to understand sort of the world that you exist in when you enter into these things. So to your point about the CCW earlier on, Rich, you got to have the training. You just have to. And it doesn't matter what you're talking about, but in this case, we're talking about CCW training.
Well, and I love Pat's point here. We're talking about training, right? And we're talking about the different types of training. And one of the things that's not on this list is the situational awareness training. And practicing those skills to increase the reactionary gap should also be included. But spot on, sir. Well said. Yeah. So let's talk about the gun, Dr. Fuller. This is where everybody really gets excited. And I hate that I wrote this here. Your concealed carry class was a minimum mandatory licensing requirement. I don't like that I said it that way because, of course, the hate mail flooded in when Mike said what he said, and I don't ever want to go back to that. You have the Second Amendment given to you by God. That's all you need. Okay. Now, what you gain from taking the training and getting the little laminated card you carry in your wallet, to me, it's just reciprocity and a hassle-free ability to travel around these states united with a firearm in your waistband. But when we look about the when we think about the gun, I would once again throw out the REAP test. Is the gun reliable? Is the ergonomics such that you can manipulate the control surfaces on your firearm easily and quickly under stress? Does it point well? All that other stuff. Accuracy, is the handgun accurate? And finally, power. Is the handgun powerful enough? And of course, as we talked about before, I think you and I, Dr. Fuller, is 10 millimeter is fantastic. Can I control it accurately enough to run the same kind of build drill I can run with my 9 millimeter? No, of course not. So there's the trade-off there, right?
It's very true. I've always looked at Mike's. I think REAP is a really good acronym. In my head, I always do a capital R and then small EAP.
Amen.
Because for me, for a handgun's a defensive tool. The single attribute that it cannot fail is reliability. It has to go bang when you expect it to go bang. Period. End of, full stop. End of conversation.
Amen.
If it is not reliable, whether that be springs, ammo, magazines, whatever, then it should not be used for anything other than range plinking sessions. That's it. Take it out. I mean, I have guns here that are they're fun to shoot. I bought a 25 off a friend of mine, or pardon me, a 22, a Jennings J22, for those of you who are of a certain age. It should come with a bass boat that you could use it for an anchor on, because it's just a horrible little gun. A friend of mine used to carry it for undercover drug buys. It's a cop. Mm-hmm. And he showed that to me in his office one day. He's like, this is my gun I carry on drug buys. I'm like, oh, wow. You got to sell me that gun. He's like, really? Is it that good? I said, no, it's shit. But you can't carry that gun in dangerous situations. Sell me that gun. He's like, how do I be without it? I said, no. You just give it to me, sell it to me, take the money I give you, and go buy a decent firearm.
Thank you.
Buy another small gun. Beretta makes some really fine little mouse guns. I said, there's a lot of them out there. Let's get you one that's going to go bang and not click. And eventually I wore him down. The gun's been in my safe for, 18, 20 years now. I don't know that I've ever fired it. But it's got to be reliable. That gun has got to be reliable, period. Ergonomics, even a crappy gun that doesn't sit in my hand right, if I train well enough on it, I can work around that. I shouldn't have to. I don't want to, because that's time I could spend training on other things, but I can, right? I mean, we've all shot guns that are uncomfortable, and we're just like, that's not my thing. And you get rid of it and you move on. And this accuracy, you know what? Kentucky windage is a thing for some folks, right? Mm-hmm. You've got some of those older guns where the sight channel is grooved into the top strap.
Oh, yeah.
It shoots high left, and there's nothing you can move, and you just got to figure out, okay, I got to aim at his right hip if I want to K5 him. All right. Again, you don't want to do that. You want to just be able to throw the sight up in front of your eye. You want it to point naturally, and you want to put all your mind bandwidth into pressing that trigger. I get it. Power, same thing. Look, I want to hit you with the biggest thing I can hit you with, right? If I can drop a redwood on your head, that's what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if I got it, it's not going to hold primacy of place for me at this point in my life. Maybe when I'm 95, that might be a different animal. Power is one of those things that you want, but it's got to be power that you can control and that you can place accurately and repeatedly if you need to, because as we all know, handguns are lousy fight stoppers. Right? The biggest advantage of a handgun is that it's ubiquitous. You can take it everywhere you go. It's easy to conceal. It's not inconvenient. I mean, it's not like carrying an M1 Garand around with you everywhere.
Although that'd be kind of cool, though.
That would be kind of cool. Well, you remember training in the infantry, right? It always sucked to be the guy that was on the M60. Yes. If you had to hump the M60, that big old monster machine gun all day, every day, it sucked until you got to shoot.
Yes.
Right? Once the shooting started, then you're like, I am the man. But until then, it sucks. Well, that's why you carry handguns, right? Because when the shooting starts, you want that M60. But the shooting isn't all that often.
No.
So you need to be able to repeat those shots. And the REAP acronym really, really plays into the repeatability of accurate fire.
And like you said, it is a giant capital R. That if the gun is, me and my brother were having this discussion yesterday. Jeff said, what happened to that AR you had, I don't know, 20 years ago? I said, I sold it to somebody. He says, why? I said, it was a piece of shit. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, it wasn't reliable. I couldn't make it through 2 magazines without having some sort of double feed or something. There was just always something going on there. He says, yeah, but you shouldn't. I'll never sell a gun. And Jeff's probably watching right now. He said, I wouldn't sell a gun. I just put it in the back of the safe. I'm like, no, I want it out of my life. If I can't rely on that thing, it's gone. It needs to be, take a plasma cutter to it and get rid of it. And I learned that from my first primary marksmanship instructor in the Marine Corps. He's sitting there in his chair watching me fire, and he's like, that's a second malfunction you've had with that magazine, right? I said, yes, sir. He's like, take it out of the weapon, download that mag, and hand it to me. I handed it to him, and he threw it on the ground and stomped it with his boot right on the spot. He says, and he handed me another one.
It's gone.
And he's like, we got to get that thing out of the supply chain, man. It's going to get somebody killed. And I'm like, I like your head there, pal.
Right. I mean, look, I bought my first gun 2 days after I turned 16 years old, right? Mm-hmm. When it was first legal in California. I couldn't buy a rifle until I was 16, bought a Ruger 1022. It's in my gun safe right now. I've bought a few guns in my lifetime. I've sold 3 my whole life. 3. Sold a Dan Wesson that I really wish I had back. I sold an Auto Ordnance 1911 that was absolute crap. I bought it when I didn't know better.
Good call.
And, right. And I turned around and bought a Caspian Custom with the profit off of that. So that worked out real well for me. And then I sold a Bushmaster AR for the reasons you just described.
I wasn't going to say it, but that's the brand.
Yeah.
It just I got rid of.
Didn't function.
Sorry.
And I thought it was the mags, and the rear sight wobbled like it was cool. I yanked it off. I put a piece of, what do you call it? Inner tube rubber underneath there and screwed it back down. Wouldn't help. I mean, I tried everything I could other than maybe having a shaman go over it and uncurse it. But eventually I just sold it off.
Jeff said when the zombie apocalypse kicks off, even a POS will be worth a fortune.
Well, the ammo will be. That's the burden.
Yeah. Let's see. So that's the gun, right? Let's talk about the law, man. Like Andrew Branca says, you carry a gun so you're hard to kill, another law so you're hard to convict. 100% agree with that. The bad news about that is the law here in the United States is not one size fits all. Every state's laws are written different. Their state Supreme Courts interpret the laws differently. So a plain text reading of the law, I used to think was gold back when I was in my 20s. Now I realize, oh, no. You can do a plain text reading of the law and then look at how that law is interpreted and go, what? Well,
and not for nothing, how they're applied.
Yes.
Even within jurisdictions is greatly, it varies greatly. I mean, witness our conversation with Andrew Branca last week. Right. I mean, it seems like a fairly clear-cut case of self-defense in Wisconsin, yet that guy is likely going to spend the rest of his life in a cage because of the way the laws were applied.
Yes.
Because the interpretation of aggravated assault was applied to him, but perhaps not to those who were assaulting him. So you've got to know these laws, and you've got to know them for your area. Right. I grew up in California. I knew the laws in California pretty well when I left, I thought. They don't have anything to do with the laws in South Carolina.
No,
nothing, not a thing. And when I retired, I'd been 20 years in the federal service, right? And I figured, okay, my odds of getting sideways with the law in South Carolina are pretty slim. I mean, given my background, given my general behavior, my approach to violence, right, is usually headlong flight in the other direction. All that being said, the first thing I did within a month of retirement is I went down and took a South Carolina concealed carry class. Because I wanted to know the state laws. Because as a Fed, I knew the federal laws.
Right.
Didn't know the first thing about state laws because they didn't apply. Right? The supremacy clause of the Constitution says, in essence, if I'm acting in the scope of my employment as a federal agent, state laws don't apply to me. So I paid no attention to them because I knew I wasn't going to go out and do something wildly irresponsible and stupid. But now I'm not a federal agent anymore.
No.
Right? I'm a used to be. I'm a used to was.
I've told this before, man. I was me and Seeklander and this other guy, I won't say his name. We were flying to teach a class, and he's a former member of CAG. And so me and Mike make it through security, and we're looking around like, where the hell is he at? And he's got a wall of uniformed police officers around this guy. And we're like, whoa, what has happened here? And we went up to him, and he's like, what's going on, guys? And in his carry-on, he had all kinds of gun gear, magazines, and everything we were going to teach his class with, except for the handgun. And he thought that was just like, I'm sorry, because I left the Army. I left JSOC. I became an air marshal, and now I'm just a guy now, and I'm getting in trouble. I'm like, yeah, brother, welcome to the party.
Yeah, and the first time I flew after I retired, I went down to the NRA show in Texas. I think that's where I met you and Mike for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I went down there with Andrew Bronca, and I hadn't been through a magnetometer since pre 9/11.
Yeah,
because you fly armed as a federal agent, so I always went through the special, secret entrance and filled out some paperwork and jumped through the burning hoops and whatnot. But I hadn't been through a magnetometer as a member of the hoi polloi in over 20 years. So I hit that magnetometer like a monkey having a relationship with football. I looked like an idiot because I just didn't know what to do. I'm like, oh, take my shoes off. That's ridiculous. What are you talking about? My belt.
Do you know who I am?
I'm an American. Yeah, I mean, I had to go back and forth with the magnetometer. She's like, are you wearing a belt? Oh, yeah. Well, take it off. Oh, okay. Are you wearing shoes? Yeah. Well, take them off. Oh, for the love of God. Right. And, of course, the regular travelers are standing behind me like, who is this freaking moron? Where's he been for the last 20 years?
Right.
Because I didn't know the law.
Yeah.
I didn't know it. I know it now.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here is gun law, your state gun laws, the ammunition laws. Every state you're going to possess and or carry a firearm in, you got to know them. I mean, Mike and I are going to New Jersey to teach a class, and I'm like, am I going to take my carbine or am I going to do what I've done before in some of these restrictive states? I'll just use what they got when I get there, get a 0 on it and run it. I'll probably just do that so I don't have to go through the hassle. But you got to know these laws, the carry laws in the state that you're in, other concealed laws and unconcealed laws. Like if I'm going hiking in Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, does this park or that park allow me to run some sort of chest rig open so that I can hike and use my hands and stuff? Self-defense law, every state's different. Some states are duty to retreat, some you have none. Some are castle doctrine, some are stand your ground. You got to know the law. That's your ROE. And one of the things that, you mentioned, Dr. Fuller, the show you and Andrew Brunk and I did last week, it was fantastic, by the way. We talked about the Apple River stabbing at length, about an hour and a half. But one of the things he said was, yeah, it's an ROE, just like you have OCONUS. But what's different here is you're going to be judged by your enemies. And I thought that was a really wild way of putting that.
Yeah, it's a really good way to put it. And these laws are complicated, folks. They're written by lawyers, okay, for lawyers. And to Rich's earlier point, a plain text reading is not going to get you there. And, you can do things like, I like to hike in national parks, okay? Well, the laws about carrying a gun in national parks are different than the laws about carrying a gun in state parks. Mm-hmm. And the laws in South Carolina are different than the laws in North Carolina. Well, I can hit North Carolina with direct fire from my backyard. Okay, that's how close I am to the border. So it's a very simple thing for me to go to a state park in North Carolina to go for a hike. Well, what are the laws? I've crossed a border. Can I take these guns over the border? What can I take? What can I carry? How can I carry it? These are all not just carry laws, but they're gun laws. South Carolina puts a size cap on the size of a firearm you can carry concealed.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
so
that.
Like you just showed a picture of your pistol, right? Well, they're gun savvy enough here to realize if they simply say, well, you can carry any pistol concealed, now they've got to deal with rifle caliber pistols. Mm-hmm. So they put a size cap on it so that you can't have, in essence, a pistol caliber carbine. But is that the same in North Carolina? I don't know. Is it the same in Georgia, Florida, Utah? And you got to know it, folks, because I didn't know is not going to keep you out of prison.
Nope.
Especially when you consider that no one's going to know that you have that concealed firearm unless they see it, or more likely unless they hear it, right? Well, mm-hmm. Once that happens, particularly if there's someone taking the room temperature challenge there, they're going to look at you real hard. And if you have the wrong prosecutor, he's going to rail you with every single thing he can. And not only can you get criminally sanctioned for carrying the wrong gun or using the wrong gun in the wrong place, but it's going to fuel their narrative of you not being a responsible adult in society. It's going to fuel the narrative of you're a criminal looking for a place to commit the crime. You are hunting another human being, right? And the examples of this are the historical records replete with this stuff. It just, mm-hmm. The prosecutor can say whatever he wants, and anything he can say to paint you out to be guilty of the crime. Even if it invokes emotions and not the law, he's going to use it. So don't set yourself up for that kind of angst, that kind of potential damage after the fact. Know the law and obey it.
Yeah, you definitely. So again, Attorney Andrew Branca is giving away his book, The Law of Self-Defense. So go over there to his website. I think you just have to pay shipping and handling, and he'll ship you the book. You're never going to get a better deal than that, folks. And if you're like me, you'll keep that damn book on the dog ear, because one of the things you pointed out, like us that are people that are listening to this today, we're not going to do well in prison, because most of us are former cops, former law enforcement. We put a lot of scumbags in prison. Once that word gets out in Gen Pop who we are, it's going to be a rough time for us. So know the law so that we don't ever end up in Gen Pop, right?
Yeah. I'm not mentally prepared to sit in a box for the rest of my life.
No.
That just isn't, I don't have that background, right? Some guy that, he's 50 years old and he spent 35 years in institutions. It's a little less of an impact for him, right?
I love going to bed next to my beautiful Miss Lisa every night, brother. I don't want to go to bed next to Bubba every night. I'm not interested in that.
And believe you me, the day that you're locked up for the rest of your life, plenty of people be knocking on Miss Lisa's door, wanting to ride your truck, shoot your guns.
That's right.
Sit on your couch, I feel really bad, Miss Lisa, for your loss. You doing anything Friday?
Yeah.
Don't set yourself up for that kind of angst.
No. So know the law. Let's talk about number 4, consistency of carry. If you're committed to carrying a gun, carry your gun. This pertains to the location and type of carry. I've seen people that, Dr. Fuller, that sometimes they'll do ankle carry, sometimes they'll do small of the back, sometimes they'll do appendix. They're kind of all over the place. They're swapping out guns. Well, like the ankle holster, if I'm running that, I'll put in a J frame. But if I'm running appendix that day, it's going to be the EDC, whatever.
Well, if it's spring, I carry this gun. If it's summer,
yeah, it's like, man, or they'll sometimes, this gun, it's a striker fired handgun. I'm a little leery of it, so I don't carry around in the chamber. But with this one, I do. I'm like, so consistency of carry doesn't mean just carry the gun all the time. It means be consistent with the family of guns and the method with which you carry. And because Kyle Lamb had a story one time, I don't know if he told it on this podcast when we interviewed him or not, but he said he was somewhere like, "Oh, Kyle, what are you carrying?" And he said like it was a 380 auto, and they were kind of laughing at him. He's like, "What kind of gun you got?" I'm like, "Well, it's in the car. But I'm carrying a 45." Like, "You can carry shit right now. I win."
And Kyle Lamb's one of those guys who he'll kill you with a tuna can lid if you had
100%.
to. Him with a 380 is a lot worse than
Yeah.
some other guy with a 45 that doesn't know what he's doing, that hasn't trained. And consistency is absolutely spot on, Rich. It absolutely is. If you're going to carry. I've struggled mightily to go to appendix carry. Mm-hmm. Because I spent so many years carrying, on my hip.
Right.
I carried inside the waistband, but I carried it just behind the point of my hip. And I understand all the advantages of appendix carry. I really do. But it's hard for me at this point in my life to get around the fact that I've got 500,000 draws from the hip.
Right.
Can I carry from appendix? Do I carry an appendix? Yes, I do. Yes, I can. Am I going to delude myself into believing that I'm anywhere near as fast and as natural, if you will, on the draw from the appendix as I am from the hip? No, I am not. But that's consistency of carry. That's 20 years of daily carry.
Right.
Absolutely daily carry. You've got to be consistent in that. And I don't care if you carry a 380 in your offside jacket pocket. If that's where it is all the time, it may not be perfect. I may suggest alternate strategies that might work better for you. But there's a lot to be said from it's consistent. You know where it is. You know what the challenges are. You know what the advantages are. And you work on it.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't get the time in switching guns, switching carries, switching holsters consistently. How many people have we all seen that read an article in a cool guy gun rag, go out and buy the cool guy gun of the day? 3 months later, they got a different gun. And they're coming out in competition all the time. Well, Masada Yub carries this. So Mike Seeklander carries that. I'm like, how about this? Buy a gun that is reliable,
Mm-hmm.
buy some extra ammo, buy a gym membership and some sneakers and some fruit,
Yes, that's right.
and see what you can come up with. But it's not glorious, it's not sexy, and we're Americans and we like to have our problems solved by gear and equipment, not by hard work and effort if we can avoid it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Alan Kelly says, one gun, one holster that can be adapted to seasons and dress. Yeah, well said. And that's the goal. I find it difficult. And of course, we have, and it's probably a good time to talk about now, we have two amazing holster sponsors, works.com. Shan Hippel over there is doing phenomenal things, as well as Precision Holsters. John is doing amazing things there. They're really pushing the bounds of what I thought a holster could be, because like many people on here today, in the early 90s, late 80s, all we had was an Uncle Mike's. I mean, there might be that and one or two custom leather guys that were out there making some stuff for us, but the plethora of holsters, and it's not one size fits all. Recently, my brother, I need to get it on here. He brought a We the People holster, I believe it was. And he was like, this is a fatal flaw, man. Check this out. The holster, it was pushing the mag release. So the magazine was popping out. I mean, just any little movement, and it did that. I'm like, if they tried that damn holster on for 30 seconds with that SIG P365, I think it was, I could be wrong, they would know that this is wrong. So he wrote him a nice letter like, hey, guys, this is a fatal flaw. Let me show you what's doing here. They send him another holster. It's doing the same damn thing. So he gets one from Works over at Shan's. And I said, look at this, Jeff. Not only is the material better, you can see the quality in this Works holster, but and Shan realized that, and it's cut out so that it won't push that button. So it's a difference between just making a holster to sell it and making a holster for people that might be in a gunfight with that holster. And
carrying consistently is going to reveal those flaws. Training consistently is going to reveal those flaws. And you much rather find them in training. Heck, you'd much rather find them in competition.
Right.
You'd rather find them in an actual gunfight.
Yes.
I used to see people crash and burn sometimes at competitions because of a holster or a weapon failure. And you get very upset, right? Because you spent money, you've gone a long way, and all of a sudden, especially like if you're Mike Seeklander, in 2 seconds, screw up on a given stage can put you out of the running completely.
100%. You're out of the top 10.
You're done. You're all done. So I get the frustration, I get the anger, but I always look at it as like, look, and this might have been just because I approached competition as training. Better to find it here, right? And that's one of the big advantages of competition in my mind is you're going to run the guns hard. It's as hard as you're going to run your guns and your gear outside of actual combat.
Yeah. And we're definitely going to talk about that here in just a second, but let's talk about mindset. And I wince every time I hear people say this, because most of the time it doesn't mean what people, in my opinion, think it means. But and I use example of the Parkland coward. I won't even say his name on the show. And to watch him cry when the jury let him off, man, it was just sickening. Brother, you should want to put yourself in prison for what happened, for your anyway. I could really
abdication of responsibility.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was the only person on that campus that was authorized to carry a firearm. So even though he was carrying a gun, the only tool that was going to stop that killer that day, he hid behind a building for 48 minutes, chatting on the damn radio while 17 children, unarmed little boys and girls, were slaughtered. So just because you have the gun doesn't mean shit. So easily mindset could be number 1 on this list. It's number 5 only because I don't know where else to put it, and there's a confusion around what it means. I've had people tell me, and it might have been you or another one of my close friends, that was saying they put T-shirts on the targets and were shooting. You got the IPSC humanoid target, and they're shooting. As soon as the guy saw like have a Coke and a smile T-shirt on, he couldn't shoot him anymore. And he turned the gun in. Was that your buddy?
Yeah, it was a good friend of mine. His gun is in my safe now, and he's a good guy. And I applaud him for realizing it during training, that it was the first time he actually realized I'm training to shoot other people, and I can't do that. Right. Okay, not my perspective, not my worldview, but I can respect that. I can respect that that's your approach, and I respect you for getting off the train.
Right.
But if you're going,
some of us are on the train.
Yeah. If you're going to carry that firearm and you're going to contemplate using it socially, right? In a kinetic social engagement, you've got to understand what you're signing up for. And if you don't want to sign up for it, go with God. Doesn't make you a bad person, right? Just understand you've got to redo your self-defense plan. If you're taking those set of options that a firearm gives you off the table, that's fine. A lot of people do that. Still have a plan.
Yeah.
Still have a mindset to support that plan. Figure out what you can and cannot do and go forth.
Yeah. And again, if that's not your thing to carry a firearm, once you make that determination, I respect the hell out of your friend who did that. Then, carry a cell phone, carry a flashlight, be a great witness.
First aid gear.
Yeah. Be a value add member. That is an unarmed value add member. It doesn't mean you can't contribute. You absolutely can contribute. You're just not going to be on the kinetic, part of the plan. But you need to have the will to win, man. And the will to win may mean, when the gun jam, you just beat them to death with an unloaded handgun. I mean, whatever it takes to win.
And however you define winning.
Right.
There was a time in my life where I charged to the sound of the guns. Right. That was my job. You and I did the same thing in terms of driving with a whole bunch of our friends north towards the sound of the guns.
Yep.
Okay. I did that. I did the kick doors, drag people out of their hidey holes, cuff them up and send them off to federal prison. I've done all of that. My definition of winning now is something vastly different. Vastly different. My definition of winning now is getting away. Now, in a situation where bad guys shooting up a school and I'm there and I happen to be in a position to assist, okay, different animal. But my general definition of winning is safe flight with me in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And, and part of that is there's a haiku that says, raise the sword and die. And it's a great reminder for me is like, hey, you're going to raise that weapon. There's a chance you're not going to make it out. So part of this mindset is also being comfortable with the fact that, hey, you had a good run. If I'm in a school and I hear the sounds of the gun, this is one of those times where I'm not going to flee, right? Because I've had 55 years on this planet. It's been amazing, and I want to make sure these children get their 55 years, whatever I need to do. It's been a good one, and that's what that guy at Parkland should have done. And instead, he chose his own safety and security over that of the little children that never got to have a life. So situational awareness and avoidance is also part of that mindset. Hardening. I'm a big fan of run, hide, fight. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course, run, hide, fight doesn't need to be in that order. It could be fight first. It doesn't matter, but it's a great little mantra that's easily understood. But you need to have the ability to harden. So that needs to be built into your mindset. If you're going to secure yourself in a room, then you're going to have to secure yourself in the room. We've seen killers come in and chain themselves into the room so they could, I think it was Virginia Tech, right?
Yeah, he chained up, I think the last room he was in, he chained it up and just did everybody. But, we've seen other examples of them barricading people out.
Yes.
And I know in my case, I've gone to teachers for my kids and given them those hard plastic door wedges.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of different ways, I can tell them, look, you can throw a belt over this, or you can do that, you can do this. But I was like, look, here's a plastic wedge. Put it under the door, kick it in there as hard as you can, and go hide in a corner.
Right.
Can he get in? Eventually, maybe, yeah. But, your job is to harden this location and make this spot difficult to get into. Maybe he moves on. Maybe he spends a lot of time there. It doesn't really matter. You're trying to burn up his time in a situation like that because the cavalry's coming. Everybody's coming, unless you're in Parkland, apparently.
Yeah.
So
Uvalde, the cavalry came and stood around.
Right.
So again, you got to be your own first responder. I mean, and that's
really,
part of the mindset. Like, I am my own first responder, right?
And if my mindset is I need to survive this, then why am I hiding in the corner? If he's banging on the door, why am I not smashing out a window and tossing kids out that window?
Mm-hmm,
right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's time to go. Got to go. Just cowering in the corner. We saw what happened in graphic detail down in New Zealand, right? When that mosque got shot up. I don't know if you ever got a chance to watch that video.
I did. It was horrific.
It's horrible. But all those people just crowded into corners, and he just shot them up. Left the room, came back, shot them up some more. Left the room, came back, shot them up some more. I would suggest respectfully that perhaps their mindset wasn't on surviving that day.
And there's natural human reactions, flight, fight, freeze. I mean, it's interesting. Lisa and I were on a nature walk, and we were walking by this little janky trailer, man, and this junkyard dog comes out and starts barking. And I'm just kind of walking, smiling at the dog, hey. And Lisa just stops dead in her tracks. And of course, now the dog's like, he just goes even more crazy. Instead of two people walking by, and now you're freezing in front of your place. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Sure.
I don't know. I thought, you're just making it worse. Keep walking, babe. Come on. And you could see her trying to fight her natural instincts, like she didn't even remember how to walk. So these are human responses. I get it. But that's where training comes in, right? So you can train to overcome those.
Right. And honestly, if she got barked at by a dog again tomorrow, I doubt that it would be as egregious as it was in the case you just cited, right? Because she's had the experience once. Right. So now she's used to perhaps walking. So maybe she still freezes, but not as long. Doesn't have as much difficulty getting started again. She's becoming stress inoculated.
Right.
So that training is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical.
Yeah. Let's see what our good friend PJ says. I recall very distinctly at one of the gun sight courses I attended, one of the students, he was a veterinarian, had a significant emotional moment when we transitioned to the shoot house with photorealistic targets. He had never mentally prepared beyond making holes in paper. And that's why realistic training is so damn important. That's why it's number one on this list and has to be number one on this list, because we're trying to develop subconscious competence. I remember one time as a cop, something happened and all of a sudden I looked and my gun was out. I don't remember drawing. It's like, oh, wait a minute. That's my hand. I mean, it was so instinctual. Mm-hmm. I just remember being like, consciously, I'm like, what is this doing here?
Yeah,
but the brain works weird that way.
And I cite occasions like that in my my book on No Safe Alternative, where you're like, hey, that guy just fell down dead. What happened to him? Somebody shot him. Holy crap. Oh, shit. It's smoking. Oh, shit, I shot him. Oh, I should pay more attention. Literally, that kind of thing can happen, and it does happen. But you can get through it. You can train through it. You can get experience and get through it.
I was just interviewed on somebody's show recently. I think it was my good friend Taylor, who's got Defenders and Disciples channel, fantastic Christian warrior type stuff. If you're into that stuff, I highly encourage you to check it out. But we were talking about that. Like, I did not fire, so it wasn't like, oh, you're just building that sub-second draw to the point where the gun comes out and you just fire one round and you didn't know. I came out, muzzled the guy, and the brain said he doesn't need to be shot. And, we're searching for other things. You know what I mean? It's like, It doesn't have to be the gun comes out, we fire. The gun comes out, we fire. No, sometimes the gun comes out and we assess. We take up slack. We get to that, the wall, and then we come off the wall.
And to me, the biggest advantage of training hard and competing hard and training on speed drills like the 5x5x5 is it gets you used to operating in a compressed time frame. Mm-hmm. Right. So imagine, recall the first time you went on the mat and rolled in BJJ. There's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of input coming at you. Now, you were probably a little bit older than the average bear when you started, so you had a little bit more experience. Maybe driving is a better metaphor. First time you get in the car to drive, right? There's just a lot of information coming at you, and you're trying to remember a lot of stuff, and your dad's yelling at you, and you keep your hands at 10 or 2 and watch your mirrors and watch your speed and watch your tack and watch your, you got to shift the gears and yada, yada, yada. And it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Right? But with experience, and better yet, with training, the next thing you know, you're driving with your foot, you're eating pizza, you're playing with your girlfriend's hair, and you're doing 90 miles an hour down the road, changing the radio song, because you freed up the mental bandwidth to be able to pay attention to other things in that same time frame. So a sub-second draw to someone who's never picked up a gun before, and you start getting them in on that is fast. That is crazy fast. Yeah. They can't, keep up with everything that they've got to do. But with training, you take a guy in experience, you take a guy like Mike Seeklander, he's going to be able to pull that gun in sub 1 second, get on the target, take the slack out of the trigger, and make a decision whether or not to shoot, because he's going to have a brain that's used to operating these kind of stresses and these kind of compressed time frames, and he can free up some bandwidth to make an intelligent decision based on the input he's receiving. But you've got to train. You've got to train, and you've got to get experience behind the gun in order to do that sort of thing.
100%. Don says many years ago at a training event, I saw 6 students balk when presented with photorealistic targets of a teenager pointing a handgun at them. They could not bring themselves to shoot at a child, even though they were being threatened. And this is so true. I wasn't going to tell this story, but since he brings it up, I'll tell it. As I said, I took my new LPVO to the range Saturday, got it all dialed in. Everything's sweet, right? So we've had this problem with this groundhog here on the farm, and it's a cute little groundhog. It's giant.
He's not climbing into your pool, is he?
Not yet, but he's getting underneath. My father lives on a house on the farm. He's getting underneath my father's house and just ripping it to shreds, right? Causing all kinds of damage and problems. But he's also a cute little fella. But he's wore out his welcome. So yesterday he's out there in the grass playing around. And I set up on the bipod, cranked the LPVO to 6, and now I'm looking at his little face. And he's out there with his little hands eating stuff. And I'm like, ooh.
Happy as a clam.
Yeah, he was for about a nanosecond. But my point of that is it's in that training, whether it's shooting a groundhog or a kid holding a picture of a kid holding a gun. It's like, this is what, sometimes you have to take those shots. And it's uncomfortable, but that's, again, why we train.
Yeah. Well, think about all the training photorealistic targets you've used in your lifetime. I guarantee you that 95% plus have been adult males.
Yes.
Maybe occasionally the adult female. You see her every now and then on some of those targets where, she's holding a gun. But you know what you don't see? You don't see a 12-year-old mentally impaired child with a rifle that's already fired 4 or 5 rounds. You just don't see that.
Right.
The American Sniper movie had made a big deal of the scene where Chris Kyle shoots the young boy with the anti-tank grenade. And then he shoots his mom. And I get it. There are significant social pressures against doing that sort of thing. But again, you got to train. You got to train on that. And as distasteful as it may be, it is part of the job.
That's right. And if that's something you're uncomfortable with, again, carry a cell phone, be a good witness. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's talk about number 6, the right gear. The belt is the foundation of the concealed carry system. Like Dr. Fuller jokingly talked about the Docker's belt. And we've all seen it, guys.
Absolutely.
We've all seen it.
Uncle Mike's holster hung on a Docker's belt.
Yeah, good luck with that.
And the draw stroke goes from the hip down to the knee, up to the armpit, and then maybe the gun comes out with or without the holster. Who's to say?
Yeah. So and then we got the holster, right? The holster should either passively or actively retain the firearm until it's time to draw. Sights, highly visible yet robust enough for one-handed manipulation. Cell phone is a piece of survival equipment, so got to get the right cell phone. Pocket flashlight, maybe the 3rd most important piece of self-defense equipment, or I don't know. But you cannot shoot unless you can positively identify the threat, and that might be by putting a wall of candela into the face of the person that you're dealing with. As a cop, when I was on 3rd shift at night, you create a wall of light on the suspect, right? It's not important that he can see. It's important that I can see. And then again, we talked about the right equipment, the knife, what's its purpose? And then any additional items, Dr. Fuller, that you think we're missing beyond the basics there?
Again, it depends on your mindset. It depends on what you're doing. If you can make holes, you should be able to plug holes. I adhere to that. So I tend to carry an ankle rig, kit for GSWs. But whatever your use case is, is it necessary that I carry a chainsaw in the back of my truck everywhere I go here in suburbia? Probably not. Is it handy if I'm Will Parker up in Montana, or if I'm up in northern Wisconsin with Pat Cahill? It might be, right? When I was in Vermont, I carried a full-size shovel and full-size axe in the back of my G-Ride everywhere I went, because I hate digging holes with a half shovel. Whoever invented that freaking evil implement ought to be beaten. And you try to cut a tree off the road with a hatchet or a tomahawk, you're gonna be there a while. So I carry that stuff. Well, I don't carry them here because I don't go anywhere where I might need them. So carry the gear you need for the use case you envision.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing about the gear is, and this is something you alluded to earlier, you're gonna think that sweet, sexy piece of kit is just the cat's meow until you use it. Just because it worked well for your buddy, or for Will Parker in Montana,
Mhm.
or for Tony in Georgia, it may not work for you. I remember, and this is why, like you said, when I ran my first Marine Corps marathon, 26.2 miles, I can't afford to have something chafing against me. So I'm serious. So like the
I know.
shoes, the running shoes I had were great. So I went and bought, okay, it's ASICS. They make socks too. I bet they're going to work great. No, the socks sucked, but the shoes were great. The sweet little Adidas running shorts chafe between my legs terribly. So that's why all the training prior to the event is going to help you work out the bugs in your equipment and your gear and your everything. So I cannot overstate the fact.
Ring it out. You got to ring it out. It's good for you on the training end of things. It's good for you on the qualitative end of things. Figure out, is this a piece of kit that in my use case is useful?
And if it breaks, that's good. It's supposed to break in training, and then you learn, and you know what I'm saying? It's like,
right. Did it break in the first 5 minutes, or did it break after 5 years of constant use?
Exactly.
I mean, I have shoes that I love, and the soles wear out. That's not a bad thing. I just replace the soles and I move on.
Which leads us to our next thing, health and fitness. Once again, this could easily be number one because, as we've said on here ad nauseum over the last 10 years, you're far more likely to die of a heart attack or a stroke from not taking care of your physical body than you ever are by a jihadi or a gangbanger at a Waffle House at 2 a.m. So you got to take care of yourself. You are going to go through the event. You watch these cops that by the time they draw their gun and get on the radio, they're out of breath. And that's not because they're not fit in a lot of cases. It's because that adrenaline dump is a hormonal surge that you may never have gone through before. So it's going to push your body to the limit. So again, train your body is going to also harden the mind as well. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm proud to say in the last 4 months, I've dropped 20 pounds and I've managed to keep it off, so it's helpful, right? My use case now is I don't fight with my body, right? I don't have to run up 6 flights of stairs carrying a 40-pound door key, smash open a door, run inside and wrestle with some, 250-pound weightlifting 19-year-old, right? Those days are over. But I do want to be able to get up and down off the floor to play with my kids. I do want to be able to get up and down the stairs. And as you point out, Rich, far more likely to die of a car wreck or a heart attack, right, than you are of a gunfight or being on the wrong end of a gunfight. Mm-hmm. That's a real statistic. And we all train really, really ridiculously hard on firearms for a very low percentage event. And I get it. It's entertaining. It's fun. You can't discount the entertainment factor of doing that sort of training. But if you really are interested in your own self-defense, you got to do. You got to take care of yourself. And can you go back to the slide for a second there? Or something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please.
Okay.
Where'd it go? No, you got to fix that diet. You do. And that's critical, right? Stop just throwing any old thing in your mouth. Pay attention to your health and fitness. And if you do get into an event, I think this bears repeating. If it happens where you end up using your firearm in a self-defense situation, and the police are going to ask you, are you okay? Tell them no. Mm-hmm. Tell them I need an ambulance. All right. And that sounds silly. You may be fine. You're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm not bleeding. I feel good. That doesn't mean you're not going to have a heart attack in 5 minutes.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. If you've had significant vasoconstriction in your fingers and toes because of this event, which you're going to when the adrenaline hits you, you're also going to have significant vacillation in the size of your internal pipes, right? Your veins and your arteries are going to open wide and just flood blood through there. And then they're going to go back to normal, right? That could loosen up any plaque you have in there that could cause you to have a heart attack or a stroke moments after the event. It also delays law enforcement involvement in terms of, cuffing you up and taking you off to the big house to question you, which will likely happen. But, I'd rather be cuffed up in the back of an ambulance.
Amen.
So get them there. And that's if you haven't called already. Okay. If you're the one that's fired a gun and there's a bad guy cooling off at your feet, it will behoove you to call 911 and ask not only for law enforcement, but also for an ambulance.
100%.
It's good for you, and it's good part of driving the narrative later on. in court that you're the one that called for medevac.
So again, the best gun gadget you can buy for your gun is a gym membership for you. Combatives, and I say BJJ in the article I wrote, but in reality, I'm talking about weapons integrated grappling. And for that, we have a lot of it on the site. Of course, the ShivWorks Collective, Cecil Birch has been a recurring guest on here for years and years and years. We talked a lot about it, but this is a giant hole in most concealed carriers, is that they don't know how to maintain custody of the firearm in an entanglement. And that is a problem. We have all that covered inside the training vault. So it might be worth it to you to take that 14-day free test drive and just go straight to that module and learn all you can. And this, for those of you that are watching, this is a photo of me and Mike Seeklander and Tom Mossman and Eric, who is now a producer in Hollywood. This is back in the day. And you can see here, we're in our dojo, but we're outside and our knees are dirty because we used to fight and grapple on the ground as well as in the dojo. And those are best that are trained in the most severe schools, right, Dr. Fuller?
So I've been consistently told, sir. So
combatives, very important. Clothing. Dressing to the gun, Dr. Fuller. What do you think about that?
I think it's critical. I mean, Clint Smith is a lot of things, but he's eminently quotable, right? And, the gun is not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be comforting. But dress around the gun. Understand, anywhere you go, there's a dress code.
Yeah.
Right? There's always a dress code. Even if there's no dress code, there's a dress code, right? You see what I'm wearing today. I'm wearing waistcoat, tie, suit jacket. Probably not going to the beach.
No.
Right? Not going to the beach. That being said, if I'm going to the beach and I'm taking a firearm, I need to dress around it. Right? I need to understand this is the gun. This is where I'm consistently carrying it. How do I clothe myself for the dress code that I'm going to be in so that I don't stick out, that I do blend, that I am that gray man, but I don't dress in such a way as to restrict overly or completely obviate my ability to draw my weapon. And maybe you have to. Maybe you're in a situation where you've got no choice. It's got to be a deep concealment situation. Well, dress accordingly and practice and train with that particular ensemble. Don't just throw it on and go, I'll get to it when I get to it. It's a formula for disaster.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So dress to your environment, dress to the task, dress to the cultural context. This picture down here, if you're watching the show, not listening to it on a podcast, I've got a picture here of allegedly a JSOC team as they enter Tunisia. And it's a bunch of white boys wearing flannels with carbines and shit. This is not how people dress in Tunisia. I've been to Tunisia, North Africa. Nobody dresses like that except for a JSOC group that just arrived in country. So the time to find out what is the best way to dress to the gun is in the pre-event. It's now. Highlight the problems before they occur. If you're new to CCW and the pants are tight, guess what? You just learned you're going to have to go up a pant size. Unless you're wearing one of those really slim Glock 43Xs or a P365. If you're like me and you're running a double stack Glock, then guess what, man? You're probably going to go up a pant size, and that's okay. Do it now. Learn how to dress the gun. Hoodies, concealed firearms, great. Gangbangers have known that for years. Many in the gun community are finally getting on board.
Right. But there are places that you and I, being middle-aged white guys, it stands out if we're wearing a hoodie.
Right.
But I'm here to tell you, a shawl-collared cardigan, I can go pretty much anywhere with that thing because I look like someone's dad. Right. And it feels great.
And I love that because that's a very important point. When I was maybe 30 years old, I went and taught a defensive tactics instructor trainer course. I think it was to Nashville Metro. And I showed up, and I wear my preppy digs, and I was clean shaven back then, and I looked young for my age. And I think a lot of folks were like, who's this clown they hired? And then, then we got on the mats, and they're like, oh, I really underestimated you. Yeah, that's the plan, brother.
That's the whole plan.
That's the whole plan. And it's Sun Tzu. If you're strong, appear weak. If you're weak, appear strong. I mean, there's something to be said for that, right?
There absolutely is. Now, we have to walk a bit of a fine line in our little rarefied community because we don't want to dress like a victim. right? We don't want to dress to a point where we look like an opportune choice piece of meat for one of these people to victimize. I tend to dress fairly nicely, by today's standards at least. When I'm just wandering around. I mean, it's not unusual for me to have on pretty much what I'm wearing now. After the show, I'm probably going to lose the tie, but that's only because I'm wearing brogued out wingtips, and let's face it, a tie with brogued out wingtips is just gauche. But I keep my stuff together because every time you read an interview with cop killers, for example, they'll say, you've been dealing with the cops for 20, 30 years. Why did you attack this one? Why did you kill this guy? And it comes down to you look like a slob, right? I thought I could take him. Well, if you're put together well and you're not displaying prey behavior, right? You're shuffling along with your eyes down, your phone in your face all the time, but you're walking around like an alert human being and you're dressed well for the conditions you're in, right? You put yourself in a position where you're less likely to be noticed, let alone victimized. And that takes some thought. It's really what it boils down to. I mean, I remember, and maybe I told you about this, when I first got to Vermont, one of my first cases I went on, I went out to a Vermont dairy barn in a suit and, nice, closed lace shoes, black shoes, and a nice overcoat and, fedora because it was fall, and just wrecked the shoes. But I walk in there and every farmer there was just like, this is revenuer, quick, hide the still. I mean, so I learned pretty quickly that, look, if you're going to talk to a bank president, all right, dress for the bank president. If you're going into court, dress for court. If you're going to talk to some guy up on the top of a hill in Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, perhaps Carhartts and some work boots is a better approach.
Right.
So dress for the environment, but keep in mind that you're dressing around that gun.
100%. Absolutely. So the 10th and final thing, ammunition selection. It took us all this time to get to ammunition selection. And, this is something that you know a lot about. You've written for it on the AmericanWearSociety.com when the FBI made the transition. What round were they transitioning to?
They transitioned to a bonded jacketed hollow point. It's just a more modern 9mm round, and it's phenomenal stuff. I mean, it really is. And in my article, as you mentioned, it goes into great depth for those of you that are having difficulty sleeping at night. I highly recommend reading that article. But it does kind of delve into why you don't want to be emotional about this. And let's face it, folks, shot placement is key. Right? Amen. It really is key. And Rich and I have both been to war. Several of the people that are watching have been to war using ball ammunition, right? Not the best stuff for stopping fights. And it still stops fights. Okay. It may not be the best, but it will work. Mostly because of volume of fire, right? If someone's worth shooting once, they're worth shooting twice.
Well said.
There's what's a machine gun motto? It's a whole lot to the everywhere. To the body, one to the head. Let's just do a whole lot to the everywhere. That being said, you may only get one shot on target. And, John Correa and others will tell you very clearly, the winner of the fight tends to be the person who gets the first significant hit on target. Yeah. All right. So pick ammunition that's going to do the job. It's got to be internally, externally. It's internal ballistics, it's external ballistics, and it's terminal ballistics have all got to be spot on. And fortunately, folks, you live in an era where that is possible. You can get ammo that does all those things. Amen. It functions beautifully in your gun. It flies straight through the air to the point of aim being the point of impact. And that when it does hit the target, it does what it's supposed to do. Right? And that's a change even in our lifetime, Rich.
100%.
Yeah. How many times have we heard stories about denim and leather jackets plugging up the hollow point on a round and turning a hollow point round with normally mushrooms beautifully? Suddenly it's punching holes like an ice pick because it's not expanding. Right. Well, that is absolutely avoidable to these days. You don't have to endure that anymore. All right. So don't choose an ammo for social uses in particular that's going to do the job you want it to do. And there's no reason not to.
No. And if you're watching the round that I have here is a Federal HST. Big fan of the Federal HST. It's a great round. Is it the perfect round for you? I don't know. Depends on your use case. But I think for most of us, the use case is going to be a jacketed hollow point that reliably and rapidly expands through a variety of barriers.
And the bonding, that molecular level bonding is critical to
Yeah.
maintain mass.
And everybody says bonded. I don't know if a lot of people in the gun community even know what bonded ammunition is. It's like you said, it's molecularly bonded so that copper and the lead is going to stay together, because that's what you want, right? I mean, when that round is recovered from Skittles' dead body, we want the 100% of that bullet still intact.
Right. And those of us of a certain age have been hit in the face with jackets splitting off of rounds when we're shooting steel. We've found rounds in deer or other animals, or found them on the ground where the jacket is peeled partially or completely off the lead core.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will say, well, that's 2 holes for the price of 1. Yeah, that's ridiculous, because it's 2 shallow holes for the price of 1 significant hole. All right?
Yeah.
And stick with a round that does what you know it's going to do. Not, well, I hope it does something. You know, this argument about everybody's always got a round that they love that, oh, it hits and it spins and it tumbles and it does. Okay, one, just stop with that silliness. Okay, because it's too random, right? You want the round, even if that does happen, and folks, most of the time it doesn't. But even if it does happen, is it going to hit something significant or not? I don't know. I put the shot where it should be, but then it just went all over the place and popped out his pinky toe. That's not what you want. You want a round that stays together, that maintains a mass of 90 to 95%, and that's eminently achievable.
Yes.
I mean, we were pulling the rounds that the FBI eventually went to. We were pulling 98% on average of mass maintenance. I mean, and that's through barriers, right? It did punch through typical home barriers, through leather jackets, through walls, whatever, and then hit the target, then penetrate 12 to 14 inches and stay together. Stuff was amazing.
Yeah, you can really go down the rabbit hole with ammunition. That's a rabbit hole that's probably worth going down at least once or twice to select the right kind for you, and then make sure that it functions flawlessly in your firearm. Because what we're looking for is a round that's going to dump all of its kinetic energy within the first 8 to 12 inches and then kind of not over penetrate. But you know, the thing I like about Federal HST, and I'm sure other manufacturers are doing the same thing, is they're making them relative to barrel length. So you don't, you're not throwing these flames out because the round is not, they're making them relative to, okay. Because I think that's one of the problems with some of these rounds. Like, I'll use the example, like a 5.56, it was designed for, I think, an 18-inch barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the round leaves the barrel after 18 inches, all the powder burn it's going to do has been done. So when you get a shorty like mine at 7.5 inches, the reason you're throwing fireballs is because all of that, it's still burning and it's just wasted. So Federal HST makes one for, if you're carrying a micro, the powder burn is going to work fine for you. A compact, all the way to a full-size handgun. So that's one of the reasons I like Federal HST. They put a lot of work into that round, and it's a pretty damn good round. And
there are companies that do that. And that's why I say, get the round that does what you want it to do, right? Mm-hmm. If you were going to go hunt Cape buffalo in Africa tomorrow, probably getting a lead core bullet is not the answer, right? You want something that's just a solid lead bullet. Forget lead core. You just want a big chunk of lead that you're throwing downrange. And that's only because you can't get depleted uranium.
Right.
But that is not necessarily what you want if you're after two-legged game. Okay, so choose it. We've talked about it over and over and over again. A firearm is a tool, and the ammunition is the tool. All right, I have a tool out in my garage that drives nails. Right, it uses little 22 primer rounds. It drives nails into concrete because I build walls and stuff all the time. I pick the nail for what I'm trying to do. Right, I don't necessarily put those type of nails into plywood or pine if I'm just backing pine up to pine. I pick the nail for the job I'm after. Same is true of your ammunition. Choose your ammunition for the job you want it to perform. Period, full stop. And you can't. It just takes some discernment and some effort, which frankly, if you're carrying a firearm in self-defense, is a minimum requirement. Right, you're putting effort into a lot of other things. Most, if not all, the things on this list that we've talked about this morning. Definitely put some effort into the ammunition.
Yeah, And Alan Kelly, of course, mentions, it might be a good time to rotate your ammunition. We've been asked this question a couple times, do you do it once a year, twice a year? How often should you, et cetera? I don't know the good answer, but I would say probably at a minimum once a year. What do you think, Dr. Fuller?
At a minimum. Yeah, it depends on how often you carry, right? I mean, if the gun sits if you're using a revolver and it sits in your nightstand next to your bed, you never carry it, it's just there for, home defense, well, maybe it can last longer. Okay, but it's doing the same thing, but you're in Florida and you're in a high humidity environment. Well, maybe not so much.
Right.
It depends so much on the unique circumstances that you find yourself in. I will tell you what I do, and this is likely because I had the federal government paying for my ammunition for so long, is every time I go to the range, the first thing I shoot is my ADC ammo. And so if I'm going to go out and practice with my handgun tomorrow, then the ammo that's been riding in my gun is what gets shot. Because it allows me to practice with my ADC self-defense ammo. Allows me to get some rounds off in not using training ammo, but actually using my defensive rounds. And two, it forces me to put new ammo in the gun because the old ammo's gone. And if I haven't gone to the range for 6 weeks, well, then it's sat there for 6 weeks. If I haven't gone in 2 days, well, then it has only shot there for 2 days. Now, I say that recognizing that I should check my privilege at the door, right? I mean, yes. I have that's a fiscal advantage that maybe not everyone has. Pay attention to the ammo in your gun is really the short answer, I suppose.
Yeah, because the good defensive ammunition is not cheap. It's expensive for a reason,
especially these days. It really is, and you kind of it would be insensitive not to recognize that. But at the same time, if you're going to hang your life on a piece of gear, make sure it's in good shape, right?
Yep.
You wouldn't get on a carnival ride at the county fair that had frayed safety equipment and, sparking lights and whatnot. You wouldn't trust your life to that level of maintenance. Well, the same is true of your firearm. Same is true of the ammunition in that firearm. If you've got a huge, you call it a dust bunny trigger lock, right? You pull your gun out and there's a huge ball of fur sitting behind the trigger. I'm going to assume that you're just not doing the maintenance that you need to be doing.
Right.
If there's a French fry stuck in the barrel of your duty weapon, it might be time to clean the gun, right? Oil the gun. Because the lube, for example, lube will drip out. Lube will evaporate.
Hey, since we're talking about ammunition, I agree with Don. He says, I think we live in a golden age of ammunition technology, 100%. But what I have heard recently, there are people running their magazine with the first 3 rounds are federal HST, and then they've got some ball ammo behind it. What do you think about that?
I don't like that idea for myself. Now, if that's your thing, that's your thing. I have a friend who's been a cop for, 40 years, and he swears by the idea that he does what he calls a party mix in his shotgun. So he has a mix of slug and double-aught buck in the gun in some seemingly random pattern that I don't know how you're going to keep all that straight in a firefight, but okay, whatever. I will say this. In the first Gulf War and in Afghanistan, I would always load 3 tracer rounds, which are not easy to get, by the way.
Right.
Especially, it's a pain in the ass, into each of my magazines on my AR. All right. So on my M16 in the first Gulf War, my M203 after I snatched one away from Snuffy because I could put smoke where I wanted it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I always put the first 3 rounds in each magazine were tracers, and then I loaded it up with the rest of the ammo because that gave me a visual stimulus that, hey, this mag's about done. I need to dump this mag and get a new mag. So, and I learned that from an old Vietnam vet that told me that. And it worked out fine for me.
Yeah.
Although I will tell you, in some cases, I was like, I'm down 4 mags. I don't remember switching mags, let alone ever seeing a tracer. But apparently it happened. So people that load their weapons like that, if that's your thing, hey, man, you do you, boo-boo. I wouldn't suggest it because I want that consistency. I want every round to do what I expect it to do, what I know it will do from my training. And I don't want to go wasting time and thought processes in the moment when I'm trying to defend myself going, oh, wait, which round is this? Yep. Is it going to make a significant difference in terms of accuracy? I don't know. Is it going to make a significant difference in terms of reliability? Maybe, but why risk it? Why take the chance? Why, have to add an additional thinking step into what's going to be a difficult, trying, time compressed situation.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of agree with you. I heard that and I'm like, I think that does come from, as Greg points out, the idea, and you pointed out too, the idea of the shotgun. And my Mossberg 500 is probably like that, buckshot slug. And I don't know why I started doing that. And I don't know the utility of it. I may have to rethink that, but I think that carried over into, I'm going to load my CCW magazine the same way. And to your point, when I went to combat squad leaders course, one of the things they recommended to us was load your magazine with all tracers on your M16, with the idea that you can direct the fire of your squad. And if you look at this picture of me in the cover, same thing. I've got a lot of smoke on my 203 vest. And as a squad leader, I always carried, I wanted a 203. I want to be able to shoot the star clusters here, shoot the smoke over there. I've got my magazine loaded with tracers so I can show my guys where I want them to pour their fire. All these kind of things. We're talking about ammunition selection, guys. That's why we're having this conversation. But
you're choosing the tool for the task.
Correct.
You're not letting the task or the tool drive the task. You're
exactly.
Saying, okay, I'm going to do this. Now, when as a squad leader, you were loading your mags all tracer. Were you telling your riflemen to load them all tracer?
No,
absolutely not. Two reasons why. One, you don't want them confusing everybody else. Two, you don't want them marking themselves as targets, more than they need to be.
And a lot of times I necessarily shouldn't be fighting as much as I should be leading, right? And this
managing that violence.
Exactly. I need to be managing and orchestrating these 13 pipe hitters to get the damn job done. The 3 teams that I've entrusted to. And a lot of times, you get target fixated on, no, I want to get in the fight. Well, you're supposed to be controlling this chaos, brother. Right. And that's how you do it, with maybe a magazine of tracers.
Yeah. And the nice thing about doing stuff like that is you can just tell people, look, shoot at the red smoke.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if they don't know what they're shooting at, right? It's private. Well, that doesn't work in the civilian community.
Right. It's a shame, right?
Pesky laws. You talk about buckshot and slug, and in the Bureau, we qualified with shotguns my whole career. I don't think they do anymore. I think they've taken them out of circulation. But we trained with slug and buck. So my whole career, I had to qualify with buck and slug. And I will tell you that the only time my gun was loaded with buck was on the range. And my thought process on that was I just always use slug because I can fight from, let's say, 0 to 25 yards with buck. Maybe 50. I don't know if they monkeyed with the forcing cones and, if somebody Van comped my gun, which of course that never happened. But realistically, I'm talking about a 25-yard gun. Well, so is my handgun.
Right.
But with a slug, now I'm at 50. Easy. Right. And it's just as devastating up close and personal as that buck is at 3 yards. And you're not going to convince me that a 3-yard shot off of a double-aught buck is going to be any more terminally ballistically effective than a 1-ounce slug is going to be. I mean, I saw a guy hit in the chest once with a slug and it blew 4 inches of his vertebrae out his back.
Jesus.
You're not getting up from that.
No.
You can't tell me, oh, well, if it had been buckshot, it would have done X. Well, buckshot likely would have been stopped by plates. I don't know that plates would have stopped that slug. At least maybe it would have stopped the slug from, penetrating, but I don't know that it would have been less of a fight stopper. Right. Maybe. So my thought was always, I'm just going to use slug. And the other issue I have is as you get further away from the muzzle, those BBs start spreading out.
Yeah. But again, I go back to Don's point, and that is we live in a golden age of ammunition technology. The federal flight control double-aught buck, me and Andrew Keith, my good friend, when he was on the SWAT team, we did a lot of playing around with that federal flight control double-aught buck, and it just blew my hair back. I didn't know they could do things like that with ammunition.
Yeah, and you certainly can. I prefer, if I'm going to put stuff in the air, for me, and I'm not telling anybody else what to do. But for me, if I'm going to put something in the air, I want it one at a time.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
I put 9 double-aught buck rounds out there, and 8 of them hit the guy, and 1 of them bounces off his cell phone and goes wide. I still own that round.
Amen.
And that's morally and legally. I own that thing whatever it does. So I want to minimize what's in the air.
I think a lot of people forget that double up buck, that's 9.32 caliber pellets. It's basically 9mm bullets flying, and you're responsible for every one of those bullets.
But they're just not as aerodynamically efficient
No.
as 9mm rounds. So.
Bonus round, guys. Just when you thought we were done, we got some bonus for you here. Bonus content. Some unnecessary CCW stuff out there. Adjusting your CCW firearm in public. I have heard people say, never, ever, ever, ever do this. I could give a fiddler's fart about it, to be completely frank with you. If you need to reach up, just like you're scratching or maybe you're adjusting your phone, if it's riding somewhere, pinching you, again, going back to YouTube, like, oh no, you just take the pain till you get to the bathroom and you close yourself in the door and then you adjust it to your clothing. I'm like, what are you talking about? Nobody's paying attention. I mean, that I'm just another middle-aged guy in Lowe's, man. If I need to adjust my firearm to bend over and pick up the light fixture, nobody cares.
You address it real well in the rest of the article. I would only caveat that by saying, if you're in places where there are legal issues, pay attention. Right. So like in Massachusetts, if somebody simply sees your gun, if it flashes in a situation like you just described, it's a chargeable offense. It's a criminally chargeable offense. So, with appropriate deference to the legal restrictions in your community, I absolutely agree. Because people don't pay attention. I mean, I've had conversations with people 10 minutes long, and as I leave, they notice I'm not wearing my jacket. I'm carrying, a Glock 21, 2 magazines, cuffs, and a baton. And they're like, "Oh my God, you've got a gun." I've been talking to you at arm's distance for the last 10 minutes, and you didn't notice that. So yeah, you're right. Most people don't know what they're looking at. Same with printing, right? Guys like you and I and the criminals will notice printing. Yeah. Nobody else is going to notice.
Yeah, and when I see somebody printing in public and they're a well-dressed guy or gal, and I see a little bit of printing and I can pick it out, I don't see danger. I see ally. You know what I mean? Because if you watch the
as long as he knows I'm an ally.
Yeah. But I mean, I think there's so much, again, this is just me, I'm not speaking for Rich Brown, not for the American Wear Society, LLC. But I think there was a Secret Service agent who was on Bush's detail, and all Secret Service agents seem to have great hair, but we can have another conversation about that. And they all wanted to be FBI agents first. It's not a lot of people know that. But he was saying, how you tell a good guy with a gun? It's in his holster. Yeah, and it's as simple as that. So all this, when I go in, the first thing I look for is 5'11" pants and bulges. And I'm like, what are you looking for? Well, I'm situationally aware. For what? Well, they got guns. I'm like, they're allies, bro. They're people like you and me. They're armed Americans for the right reason. It's Skittles that runs in with a high point already out and leveled when he comes through the door. Those are the ones I'm worried about. He can't spell holster.
And frankly, where you and I live, running into people carrying guns is pretty common.
It's every day.
It's an everyday thing. I mean, I've been at lunch with you before and spotted a guy came in that was open carrying,
Yeah.
It happens. And like you said, it's the guy who's got his weapon shoved in his waistband, no holster, pants sagging down around his knees. That's the guy that perhaps I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to. Because in 20 years, I took a lot of guns off of people, and maybe PJ's still here. He can confirm or deny. I never took one out of a holster.
No.
Not once.
No.
Never took one out of a holster.
That's an important lesson for you folks. So printing in public, not worried about that. Night sights, I think they're not necessary because I need to illuminate the target, not just illuminate my sights. If they're on your gun already and you like them, that's cool. But what I'm saying is you don't need to run out and spend $100 for some Trijicon night sights. What do you think, Dr. Fuller?
I agree. I mean, for a long time, I wanted night sights on any gun I might use socially. And the Bureau put tritium night sights on my Glock in 1997, and I had them on there my whole career. So it didn't cost me anything to have.
Right.
So I didn't mind having them. I don't feel them necessary now, but I feel much more strongly about a weapon-mounted light than I did back then. But I'm happy to admit that my use case as an old retired civilian is a weapon-mounted light really a necessity for me now? Doubtful. Statistically speaking. But statistically speaking, I don't need to carry extra mags, and I carry those.
Yeah.
And in my experience, I once arrested a guy that had I not had a light to blind him with, I would have shot him. Mm-hmm. Because he had something, it was low light, and he popped out of a room while I was looking for him, it was one of those searches where you hit the house and everybody's moving, and I come through, I'm like fourth in the stack. And by the time I get into the basement, it's full on Silence of the Lambs, dark. I'm all by myself. I'm yelling for this guy to come out, and he does, but he's got something in each hand. So, I take a couple pounds off the trigger and I hit him with the light. And when I hit him with the light, a couple things happened. One, he turned his head and closed his eyes. And that bought me enough time to realize that he had a remote control in one hand and a bottle of Sprite in the other.
Yeah.
And so the finger came off the trigger. So I'm a big fan of lights, and the night sights wouldn't help me at all in that situation.
No.
Maybe to put rounds on target, but certainly not to identify who I was shooting at.
Yeah, now I carry a dedicated light on my concealed carry firearm because why not? I mean, most of the time I'm running around during daylight, but again, you walk into a store and you're in low light and the power goes out in lows. Now you're in utter darkness. And I don't know. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, well, exactly. What's the cost? If you're already carrying a big old heavy double stack handgun, is the weight really an issue? Is the size really an issue? I would say no.
No. Carry positions. I like the appendix. Been rocking appendix carry since before they had a term for it. All the way back again 32 years ago. Started carrying appendix because it just made sense I was doing judo at the time on my back a lot, and I saw the necessity for it. And, sitting when I first started carrying concealed, it was more of a 4 or 5 o'clock, but then I'm sitting in a sedan all the time and I'm like, this is really uncomfortable. Not that carrying an appendix is that much more comfortable, but it's easier to get to without a whole lot of leaning forward and getting the gun out. So again, kind of agnostic about carry positions. I just want to go back to the part we talked about with consistency of carry position.
Absolutely true. And I will say this about AIWB. It's a lot better. The state of training and the state of gear around AIWB is so much better now than it was 30 years ago. I mean, getting a purpose-built AIWB holster in the 90s, forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it. Wasn't going to happen. Now you can. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of them, and about the second or third one I bought, I was like, hey, this is actually comfortable. The other two were not. This one actually I can wear. I can sit for long periods of time on drives and whatnot and not be uncomfortable. And the state of training, right? Nobody was training around AIWB back in the day. They weren't saying, okay, so here's where you're drawing. Oh, all you heard was, it's unsafe. It's not good. In California, they referred to it derogatorily as Mexican carry.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the gangbangers carry.
Or felony carry. I've heard Mexican carry.
That one as well. Yeah. But nobody was training it. Nobody was going to let you shoot it at competition. Oh, it's far too dangerous. Far too dangerous.
No, it's just now coming around where you can run that.
So that's my point. Is the training and the gear around it are so much better now because it's more mainstream. It's much more acceptable, and I think that's a good thing.
And remember, go to AmericanWarriorShow.com. On the right-hand side of the page, we've got links to all of our holster sponsors, Works and Precision. Works makes the best weapon-mounted light appendix carry holster on the market, period, full stop. Precision Holsters makes the best ultra appendix holster without the light. So again, that's why we're comfortable having 2 holster sponsors to meet the needs of our membership. And we got a discount code for you on there, AmericanWarriorShow.com, because the holsters today, you get what you pay for, guys. These are not cheap, but this is something you're going to use every single day for years, and it's going to take care of you.
Your kids will fight over it when you're gone.
Amen. Dr. Fuller, that's all I got. Kept you on here almost 2 hours, man. I'm sorry we went so long, but hopefully this was usable information for folks.
I really do hope it is well received by the audience because I think it's critical info. And I think, it's foundational to the American Warrior Society. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I think appeals to the mass of your membership. And I think it's critical to get it out there. And again, you talked about it before, 8-10 years ago. It's good to revisit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've told Mike that too. I said, it seems like we're mulching over the same ground, but we've got to remember, people find us when they find us, and if they jump in on show 380 and like this is their first exposure to it, or maybe they finally turned 21 and they went out and got their concealed carry permit and they want to be an armed American, praise God, welcome to the club. But we need to shepherd them through the process. I'll get to PJ's comment here. He says, "There's always great discussion today. Shout out to everyone contributing here." From Rich and TC leading the discussion with expertise to all the AWS members here. I'll always take something away from the discussion points made in these shows. Cheers, brothers and sisters. Thank you, brother. That's high praise.
It's well said by a good-looking man right there.
Amen. Amen. Mark over in Australia says, thank you. Derek says, great show today, guys. Don says, great show, gentlemen. Lots of good info to reconsider and digest. Dr. Fuller, that's all I have, sir. You want to take us out?
Fight is coming, folks. Be ready.